Hey everyone, you're listening to Concentrates with Dr. T, a podcast discussing cannabis science, news, and hot topics. Please subscribe and follow my podcast. It's published on YouTube and Spotify. Also, please follow me on Instagram, Facebook, Discord, and other social media, LinkedIn. I'm still pretty new at all the social media game and trying to get everything to be cohesive. So bear with me as I try to make it more obvious and available to you as to where to find me and reach me with questions and comments. I really would welcome comments and questions and ideas for topics for this podcast moving forward. But today we're going to talk about something that's very tragic, and it brings to the forefront a topic that's very near and dear to my heart, which is industrial safety and worker safety at cannabis facilities, and really any hazardous facility, but cannabis in particular, since that's what I've been doing for the last 9 years now. So tragically, there's been a report of a young woman who has died as a result of, likely as a result of exposure to cannabis dust in an industrial setting in Massachusetts. What you're looking at right now is an article published in Forbes by Chris Roberts, titled "Report Legal Cannabis Industry Worker Died After Breathing Marijuana Dust." So this is a very good article. I highly recommend reading the whole thing. I'm going to use it as a springboard to talk about different aspects of this story that touch topics of industrial safety, regulatory, touches biology, and chemical safety. I'm going to go through some details in how all of those things are important to this story, besides just the quite frankly, unnecessary and tragic loss of life. There's overall I would say, a lack of understanding of safety, worker safety, industrial safety within the cannabis industry. It's been a whirlwind getting this industry going, from small medical, just kind of interesting industries within different states. Washington and California famously had fairly loose medical marijuana programs prior to 2012. And then when in 2012, when it was first legalized for adult use in Washington and Colorado, it was just a mad rush to get facilities together, to put together cultivations and extraction operations and dispensaries, and start to serve the public that was already there, that was interested in these products. And so it took some time to actually ramp up, of course, the industry in the first place. And so there's been a lot of growing pains, and we're still experiencing those today, with constant regulatory changes, which some of them are needed, but some of them are not, quite frankly. So this industry continues to evolve, and it will continue to evolve for decades. And but this is one aspect that I think we are ready for the discussion, and companies should be ready to step it up on worker safety and industrial safety within their facilities, because the people that work here at these facilities, that work at cannabis facilities, are often the most passionate people you can imagine. They're passionate about the plant, what it does for them, what it can do for other people, or maybe they just like, biology, or, botany in general. And it's just such a great hands-on way of working with plants in this modern world, and exciting. And so these are passionate people, and they're not easily replaceable, quite frankly. That not everybody is so passionate about this plant or about this kind of work. And so they deserve, and just as human beings, of course, they deserve respect. And it's time to step it up on industrial safety. So we'll get into that as this podcast goes on. But first, I'll just kind of read the beginning of this article by Chris Roberts to uh, start to give the background of the story, and then I'll start to jump in and and give you more details. So, in what observers say could be the first cannabis-related death of its kind on record, a worker at a legal cannabis cultivation factory in Massachusetts died after inhaling cannabis dust, according to a federal inspection report, which is linked, and I will bring that up in a moment. And right here, I would just off the bat like to say this idea of cannabis dust. We're going to talk all about that and what exactly that is or means or probably means. At around 11 p.m. on January 7th, 2022, a worker filling pre-rolls at the Holyoke, I don't even know if that's how to say it, Massachusetts location of TrueLeave, a major Florida-based multi-state operator, became unable to breathe, according to the incident summary of an Occupational Safety and Health Administration report published online last week. The employee could not breathe and was killed due to the hazards of ground cannabis dust, said the report, which listed the case as open and ongoing. The report did not name the worker, whom TrueLeave and other media identified as Lorna McMurray. McMurray, 27, lived in West Springfield and had only recently begun her job at TrueLeave in Holyoke, according to her online obituary. McMurray's death was first reported by podcaster Mike Crawford on his show, The Young Jerks. So this Mike, he brought to light this incident that happened 8-9 months ago. I'm very glad he caught this. It's important to talk about. And it's amazing that it kind of flew under the radar for so long, but we're going to kind of get to that. And let me just say, I don't have any affiliation with any multi-state or in single state operators. Even I'm not trying to bash anybody or uplift anybody. I am just commenting on what I am seeing here, and I will not comment on on any other aspects of a reputation of any company or entity, really, unless maybe I might smash talk or bad talk the government a little bit, because they deserve it. Prohibition of cannabis for 90 plus years. Enough said there. So, but other than that, I'm going to try to be very neutral about everything and just stick to the facts here. So first of all, this idea of cannabis being so safe, and people brag and pride themselves on cannabis has never caused a single death ever. So this idea that maybe a death here could have occurred due to cannabis is upsetting for some people. There was kind of the idea that the only way cannabis could kill you is if a ton of it, a big 2-ton brick fell on top of your head. And while that's pretty much true, it can't really kill you from a molecular interaction standpoint. Too much THC cannot overwhelm your system, cannot overwhelm your biology, your receptors to the point where you die. It cannot. But things like physical trauma, a big brick being dropped on your head, or dust, which we will get very into detail in dust as we go through this podcast, these things can cause death. And so that's what we're going to see. I mean, honestly, there's deaths in any industry at any time. It's when you go to work, you are, in many cases, if you're working at any kind of factory or manufacturing, there are always hazards around you, and you need to use the tools provided by your employer and, quite frankly, arm yourself with more knowledge to make sure that you're adequately protected. Um, a lot of people are not really paying attention or close attention to this at most companies. I'm very passionate about this, so I try to communicate this to anybody who is in my sphere, but many people don't at all. So be aware of this. So, according to this book, The Health Effects of Cannabis and Cannabinoids, on the National Library of Medicine website, injury and death from cannabis can be associated with uh, there's a higher risk of being involved in a motor vehicle accident if you have used cannabis before driving. There's a correlation there. So that's a way that cannabis can injure you. Technically, there's where in states where cannabis use is legal, there's an increased risk of unintentional cannabis overdose injuries among children. Injuries. So this, is usually extreme sleepiness and just they're incoherent, and you go to the hospital and get them treated, and they end up fine. As far as I know, there's no permanent damage caused by these overdose injuries, but the acute effects in children can be frightening for a parent and need treatment to make that kid feel better as quickly as possible. But that can cause injury. And then the kicker I like here, it is unclear whether and how cannabis use is associated with all-cause mortality or with occupational injury. Okay, so with all-cause mortality, no scientific study has ever demonstrated that you're going to die earlier or if of anything because you use cannabis. So you don't die earlier of lung cancer, of heart disease, of car accidents, of, on average, all causes of mortality, all the ways you can die. It doesn't change whether you use cannabis or not. That's the current science on that. And so it's apparently an incredibly safe substance, which advocates have been saying for a long time. But and it is unclear with whether it's been associated with occupational injury. Well, we're starting to see that now. When it was on the black market, nobody was going to go to the hospital with a cannabis dust exposure and say, I was grinding 20 pounds of weed and uh, now I can't breathe. So there was never going to be any association. But now that it's legalized, we're going to start seeing associations. People get hurt at work in manufacturing environments. I don't care what you're making. People get cut. People smash their finger in a door. You could even be in just a normal office and people get injured with silly things, right? Just daily items that are seemingly harmless. So, but we're going to see more and more of these reports. We're going to see trends, and I think that inhalation of dust is going to be one that we're going to see a lot as time goes on. Hopefully, and I guess I should say we'll see it. A lot of people don't start responding to incidents like this, and I hope that's not the case. But I predict that that's probably going to be the case. So I'm going to keep harping on it as it comes up. And I'm going to give suggestions later in this podcast about how to handle this as a company or as a worker, and to try to protect yourself as best as you can from both perspectives. So basically, traditionally, cannabis doesn't really cause death, but we're going to start to see reports of that as industrial processing of cannabis increases, and also in both number of operations and size of operations. So this is where it kind of gets interesting. So some follow-up. So that report from Forbes was on October 3rd. And again, it goes through really good information. We might hop back to it in a minute, but since then, I'm bringing up some of the latest news from today, actually October 14th. The question: were cannabis regulators left in the dark about Holyoke death? And so this article goes on to discuss the death at the facility in Massachusetts of the young woman McMurray, and it goes on to talk about so the Cannabis Control Commission investigation is still ongoing, so they're not willing to comment on whether Trulieve had notified commission staff and the information, and whether it had made it back to commissioners. So, yeah, under state regulations written by the CCC, the Cannabis Control Commission, marijuana business is required to notify law enforcement and the commission within 24 hours of an alarm activation or other event that requires response by public safety personnel, including but not limited to local law enforcement, police and fire departments, public works, or municipal sanitation departments, yada, yada, yada. So basically any major incident that could involve health and safety needs to be reported to the Cannabis Control Commission within 24 hours. States are very serious about these kinds of things, and I'm not surprised that this is codified. It looks a little different in each state, but there's almost always, and I think pretty much always, something like this in there that says you need to notify the state when things happen. So if they did not do that, if that's true, their license could be at risk depending on how the state wants to handle this, their state license. So they're a multi-state operator. All their other operations would remain unaffected. Massachusetts can't do anything about any operation in any other state. They're all so, each state literally is its own controlled area, and every other state's independent. So if you're a multi-state operator, you're working in different regulatory environments in each state, but there's a lot of similarities. So something like this would be a no-brainer. I hope they did inform them in a timely manner. But if this is true, their license could be at risk in Massachusetts. So that would be interesting, an interesting development. And then in other recent news, this is from October 11th, High Times, an allegation that former supervisor says Trulieve promoted safety manager after worker's death. So a former supervisor at a Trulieve cannabis cultivation and processing operation in Massachusetts says that the company promoted the site's environment, health, and safety manager only 1 month after a worker reportedly died from inhaling marijuana dust at the facility, according to reports from Weed Week and the podcast The Young Jerks. So again, the Young Jerks keeping on top of this, bringing new information to light. So if this is true as well, which I don't know if it is or not at this point, but if this is true, it at least does not look good. And I would be interested to know the justification for promoting a safety manager after somebody dies under your watch, because this is something that's quite frankly foreseeable and mitigatable, and you could deal with this without having to have anybody die. So this would be pretty shocking. It does not look good. Maybe there's a good reason they were promoted. I guess I'd be interested to hear some rationale, but I don't think Trulieve is commenting on these things, and especially with ongoing lawsuits, and this family suing Trulieve, and they're probably not going to comment too much in public about any of this for a long time, if ever. So this is interesting because I was definitely going to touch on this. I didn't even see this in this article before, but they're talking about here, but Danny Carson, a former Trulieve supervisor who hired McMurray in spring 2021 and supervised her until he left the company the following August, disputed Trulieve's statement that protective equipment was available to employees working at the Holyoke facility. I really hope I'm saying that right. He said that the face masks at the cannabis cultivation and processing operation were for protection from COVID-19 rather than respirators designed for workers in industrial settings. The masks employees were given, he added, did not fit the face tight enough to keep out particulates in the air. They are not sufficient to help their employees with breathing, Carson told Weed Week. So this is something that has, quite frankly, floored me from the beginning of the pandemic when it was first suggested that everybody universally wear cloth face coverings. At the very least, it gave the impression that cloth face coverings can protect you from anything. If it can protect you from something as small as this COVID virus, yeah, it's protecting me from other things in the environment. But that's not true at all. For a mask to actually protect you, it must be designed and manufactured for that purpose and tested for that purpose and certified for that purpose. And on top of that, um, if a company is going to require you to wear a mask for protection, say there's a hazard in the environment, maybe it's a gas, say it's a gaseous hazard, or actually pesticide application in a cultivation facility is a good example. You need to wear a filtering mask. So that mask needs to be designed to filter out the pesticide that you're spraying in the air. It needs to be manufactured to be precise enough to do what it's designed to do. It needs to be tested to make sure that it's doing what it was manufactured and designed to do. Um, and only then will it, and it needs to be fit tested onto the employee. Each employee needs to make sure with a test, they basically release a very extremely bitter compound in the air that you're going to taste if it gets into your mouth. And if you taste it, that means your mask isn't fitting tight enough um, to filter out whatever hazard there is. So you've got to adjust it until it does. So it's got to be fit tested. And then on top of that, if for an employee to be allowed to wear one, he or she must go to a doctor to have an evaluation of their breathing metrics. So you blow into different tubes and things, and it checks your lung capacity and different metrics about your lungs to make sure that you are healthy enough to wear the mask, the face mask that is going to protect you from the hazard in your work environment or whatever environment. If the employee does not get this medical evaluation, then that's a big deal. You could be really harming somebody because not everybody is capable of wearing a mask safely. It's just reality. Not everybody can safely cover their face and breathe through any amount of cloth. Some people are more sensitive than others. So some people can breathe through maybe a simple cloth face covering, but to put on a big, gas filtering mask would be too much for their lungs to handle. So and then some people just literally can't handle even a simple cloth face covering. That's too much for their system to handle if they're sensitive enough. And so, yeah, the COVID-19 masks really have confused people further about when masks are appropriate or allowed and how to go about making sure that employees are healthy enough to wear masks. So that was an unfortunate thing that happened with the pandemic, was just these universal mask mandates that didn't give hardly any of the mandates gave a nod to the fact that some people just literally cannot wear these, even a simple cloth mask. And I think the most unfortunate and dangerous thing that happened is just giving people the impression that cloth masks can protect you from a lot more than they actually can, and giving people some false sense of security. And that could, if you have a false sense of security in something that's really not protecting you, and then you put yourself into an environment with the hazard, I'm sorry, but you're exposed and you're harming yourself. So That's probably the most dangerous part about everything that happened, was just the false sense of security for other applications that have, you know, cloth masks have not been tested to protect against. So that is that. Those are some allegations that are coming out. We'll see if any of this, if we ever get the actual story about whether the Cannabis Control Commission was notified in a timely manner, and whether um, uh, you know there was adequate safety at the facility, or also just this idea that the safety manager was promoted within about a month after somebody died under their watch due to a safety incident. That just sounds crazy. All right, so in the original article, it linked the OSHA report, and I'm going to go to the current OSHA report right now. Inspection detail. It says case status open. So Trulieve is what do you say? They're I guess fighting back against the findings of this report and the fines. They're saying that they were not in any safety violations. Quite frankly, if somebody dies at your facility due to an industrial hazard, you've violated some kind of safety regulation. So I don't know, how much money or what money they're spending on this to fight it, but I guess for their reputation's sake, it could be worth it to spend a lot more money to try to get some of this or all of this taken care of. Pardon me. So the total fine ended up coming in at $35,219. Some other information. It was fatality related activity type accident, they call it. There were 3 serious violations associated with this incident, and they are all 3 contested. And then accident investigation summary, to be added later. So a week ago or two, there was a little blurb there that has since been removed, and I was a little bit disappointed at first because the little blurb was interesting, but then I remembered that there's the Wayback Machine, the Internet Archive Wayback Machine. I went back to October 3rd, and this same report actually still contains the information that was removed. So, employee is killed when couldn't breathe after inhaling grew. See, this must have been a very initial report. Filling pre-rolls, she said she couldn't breathe. Not being able to breathe, marijuana keef dust. At 11 p.m. on January 7th, 2022, an employee was grinding cannabis flowers and packaging ground cannabis in pre-rolls. The employee could not breathe and was killed due to the hazards of ground cannabis dust. Keywords: dust inhalation. Fatality. 3 serious fines. Everything else is the same. So this initial little report led to people in the news talking about keef being a contributing factor to this, or was it keef dust that killed her? Which would point to keef maybe being dangerous in home use, or because there's never been a death from keef dust before. Well, a couple things. In home use, you could never get enough keef dust into the air to breathe it in to kill you. In an industrial setting, that equation changes because there's so much that's being worked with. There's so much in the air, and different people are sensitive or resilient to it. But even beyond that, it wasn't truly keef per se that this McMurray breathed in and killed her. I'll get into what it was in just a moment. But It definitely was not keef. So keef is the glandular trichomes that have been knocked off of the outside of cannabis flowers, and they kind of collect. There's other, cellulosic plant material and other material in with it a little bit. Has a green color, usually, or tan, and but it's mostly a collection of the bulbous trichomes that have the THC and other resin in it. Um, it's pretty sticky, sticks together, clumps together, doesn't really poof out into dust. And that's at home and industrially in gentler processes. But some industrial processes, and if the cannabis is too dry and then it's ground, I mean, it's going to generate a lot of dust that's not just this keef, not just these bulbous trichomes, but fragments of them. And so I want to show you kind of what that looks like. So people, when they think of keef or trichomes on cannabis, they think of these beautiful, white looking stalks that give it a frosty looking appearance. And as we zoom in on that, you can see uh, they make these bulbous topped stalks, and that's where the cannabinoids and terpenes are mostly stored, is at the end of those bulbs. So that's the stuff people are most interested in. So as these kind of break off and collect, that's what creates keef. And the green part is mostly left behind, but some goes with it. Nothing's perfect, right? So as we zoom in further, here you can see kind of the resin filled bulbs of these trichomes. And this is what people think of mostly as what keef and trichomes are in cannabis. But there's another side to trichomes in cannabis that people don't always think of. And here's a scanning electron microscope picture of these little spikes, tiny spikes made of mostly silica, silicaceous. They're silicaceous spikes. And here's a scanning electron microscope image of the bulbous trichomes in with some of these silicaceous spikes. So you can see now that if those spikes are getting in an industrial setting, imagine getting ground up in an industrial grinder. There's dust being generated. It's very dry, so it's breaking into lots of pieces, and these spikes are breaking off into little pieces, and getting into the air, and then you're breathing them in, and then they're getting into your lungs. So some people are going to be more sensitive to that than others. Some people can handle it. Some people cannot. I am somebody, for example, that cannot handle it. When there's cannabis dust in any amount, I'm the canary in the coal mine. In any amount in the air, in a facility, and my nose starts running, I start to get allergic reactions. My eyes are itchy. I have asthma, and so I will also have an asthmatic reaction, and it'll become very difficult to breathe. And I've got to get out of there. I cannot be in those environments very long. And it takes me, quite frankly, a long time to recover after something like that happens. But other people, many other people, can be right in those rooms working with that dust, grinding. It goes through the machine. There's dust. They vacuum it out. There's fine particles getting in the air. When I vacuumed out a CO2 extractor, that dust about killed me. I could not breathe. I had to get out of there for the rest of the day, get fresh air. I should have gone to the doctor, and I didn't. I didn't realize I had asthma at the time or what was going on. But I do now. And that's why I'm so passionate about this. So I think something like that essentially is what happened to McMurray. She was probably sensitive to begin with. I don't know if she had asthma or anything, but you don't have to have asthma or anything to be sensitive to this. She was probably otherwise sensitive to this dust, and it probably bothered her more than other people. But when you're in an environment with many other people that have been working there forever and none of them have had a problem, you just kind of think, oh, it's just me. Oh, I'm just being overly sensitive. You might gaslight yourself into thinking that, you're making a bigger deal out of something than it is. But no, you might just be sensitive, and it might be actually harming you where it's not really obviously harming others in that same way. So if you feel that in any job that you're taking on, get out of there. Your health is the most important thing. So make sure that you know what's going on. ask yourself, if you are, could I be more sensitive to these things than others? And if you are, maybe you need to find another aspect of the industry that doesn't get into physically handling the plant matter so much, because it will continue to harm you over time, and can result. Unfortunately, it's been proven now that it can result in death, to expose yourself to something that you're sensitive to. So please, 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 if you find yourself that you think you're sensitive in a way that is harming your health, or very obvious to you, get out of there and reassess how you want to interface in the industry. It's not worth it to injure yourself and put yourself at risk like this. And then on the flip side, I mean, us canaries in the coal mine, we're hinting at a hazard that does exist for everybody. Those people I'm talking about that are resilient, doesn't seem to affect them. Well, it probably does affect them a little bit, and over a long time could add up. And so we're there, us canaries, to demonstrate that this is serious, and it needs to be dealt with to protect everybody, quite frankly. So more needs to be done by companies, and I'll get into that in a moment. But you can see the kinds of things that are breaking apart. Here's another photo, and actually this article on alchemiaweb.com has a lot of great photos, but here's the bulbous trichome with the resin and the resin filled bulbous head, and then a spike, one of these silicaceous spikes. And so this, like I said, this website has a lot of cool pictures of trichomes, and of the different kinds, the spike ones and the glandular ones. And then just to I want to get into what these things are made of. So because you can think of a dangerous chemical like, I know, gasoline. You don't want to inhale gasoline, right? It's a dangerous chemical. Hexane is the primary component of gasoline, and hexane is a known neurotoxin. You don't want to spend a bunch of time standing there inhaling it. It's toxic. Okay, so every thing that you can inhale has its own toxicity profile. So what is a trichome made of? What did McMurray likely breathe in? The non-glandular hairs are of two major types as distinguished by size differences and locations, and all of them are highly silicified. The presence of silica as well as cystoliths of calcium carbonate help in the identification of marijuana even in its ash residues. So this level of silica and calcium carbonate is very characteristic of cannabis, and that's how they can find ash in your ashtray and tell it's not cigarettes, it's cannabis. I'm sure that's busted more than a few people in the past. But it's heavily or highly silicified, mostly made of silica. So what is silica? Silica is silicon dioxide. It is more commonly known as glass. So sand, glass, that's silicon dioxide, that's silica. Microchips. So in a solid form, glass, it's one of the most inert materials that we know. It's not poisonous at all. It imparts no chemical residues, no harmful residues into anything that's stored in it. You can store ethanol, an ethanol tincture. You can store your orange juice. You can store water, whatever, in glass, and it never leaches anything of consequence or of harm. It is one of the most inert materials and safe materials that we know. So as reflected on this material safety data sheet, MSDS, just some kind of glass, Cabosil M5, a kind of glass from Thermo Fisher Scientific. When you read about the hazard classification, this chemical is not considered hazardous by the 2012 OSHA Hazard Communication Standard. So glass is not hazardous. So quick look for silicon dioxide or silica. Is this harmful? It's not harmful. How could she have been harmed? How could anybody be harmed by this? Well, the devil's in the details, as they say. Here's a MSDS for the same exact chemical, silicon dioxide, except for it's ground into a nano powder, so a very, very fine powder. It can get into the air as a dust. What does it say? Oh, wow, there's a red box with an exclamation mark. Warning. There are hazard statements, eye irritation, respiratory system. H319 causes serious eye irritation. H335 may cause respiratory irritation. Avoid breathing. So P261, these are all the codes for it. P261, avoid breathing dust, fume, gas, mist, vapor spray. P264, wash skin thoroughly after handling. P271, use only outdoors or in well-ventilated area. P280, wear protective gloves, eye protection, face protection. P304 plus P340, if inhaled. Remove victim fresh air and keep at rest in a position comfortable for breathing. Some more numbers. If in eyes, rinse cautiously with water for several minutes. Remove contact lenses if present and easy to do. Continue rinsing. Call a poison center or doctor physician if you feel unwell. If eye irritation persists, get medical advice attention. Store in a well-ventilated place. Keep container tightly closed. Store locked up. Dispose of contents container to an approved waste disposal plant. So it's literally the same compound. In one MSDS, it is not a hazard. In the next one, it is do not breathe it, get medical attention, use in well-ventilated areas. And so that's what we're talking about here. The silicon dioxide of these trichomes is generally inert. Generally, it's not going to hurt anybody. But in the right context, in the right form, and in the case of it being in a small powder, it can cause harm. And so to me, this is the ultimate example of just how complex chemical safety can be. It's so simple and complex at the same time, right? Something as simple as glass that is just completely inert and safe in one context. It touches your skin, you don't break out, nothing happens. Glass is so safe. But when it is a small dust and it gets into your lungs, this inert compound that has no other way of harming you chemically becomes something that can actually kill you because it is a fine powder. So now imagine a fine powder or small particulates that do have toxic properties, like wildfire smoke, which we're dealing with in Seattle right now with a uncharacteristically long summer and sunny fall here. We have a lot of wildfires left, and there's a lot of smoke in the air. You can see it, and it's hard for me to breathe. And and those are like small particles that have toxic properties. So on top of it, so that's how important breathing is. It's we take it for granted, but air quality and then your industrial environment are so important. One more note on health effects of silicon or silicon dioxide is silicosis. Silicosis is a long-term lung disease caused by inhaling large amounts of crystalline silica dust, usually over many years. Silica is a substance naturally found in certain types of stone, rock, sand, and clay. Working with these materials can create a very fine dust that can be easily inhaled. Once inside the lungs, it causes swelling, inflammation, and gradually leads to areas of hardened and scarred lung tissue, fibrosis. Lung tissue that's scarred in this way doesn't function properly. Then it goes on to list some occupations that are at risk. Well, cannabis very well could fall into this category. We have not had enough time of legal marijuana. We have not had enough workers working for long enough time in these industrial environments to see these trends. I fear that we will see these trends if we don't start to step it up and take workers' safety seriously. So I would hate to see silicosis to begin to develop in marijuana workers 20 years from now who were involved in the grinding, pre-rolling, harvesting, or extraction operations. So what can we do? Okay, so as a company, what can we do? Well, one thing you can do is if you're designing a new facility, which I can help consult in this area, but if you're designing a new facility, make sure there's adequate ventilation in areas that are going to have likely have lots of dust, and have adequate cleaning procedures in place. As far as requiring masks, if you're going to do that, do not forget that you have to have your employees undergo a medical evaluation and a fit test. If that's how you decide to handle it and require masks, you need to do that. Otherwise, you are not only risking the employees' health and safety because you don't know if they're fit to wear a mask. Quite frankly, they don't know if they're fit enough to wear a mask. Um, when I was in my early 20s, my first job working, I was going to be spending time in paper mills, oil refineries, wastewater treatment plants. So I needed to have a gas escape mask, and I had to be clean shaven back then. Obviously, I'm not doing that job anymore, but I had to be clean shaven so that the mask could make a perfect fit on my face. And they had me go to a medical evaluation, and I barely passed when I was like in my early 20s. And the doctor was like, I can't believe I think he just thought I was doing something wrong, but I think it was definitely my asthma and lung capacity was just not there. But I barely passed, so I was able to get fitted and keep that job and get that experience, which was great. But I don't think I could pass it now, but I don't know. So I literally don't know if I am fit to wear a mask for occupational purposes. I'd have to undergo an evaluation. So you don't know with any given individual. So you can't just tell people to wear masks. There is an option of providing N95 masks that you need to give proper training to them about how to store them and clean them. Because, for example, if your employees, you give them an N95 mask and then they hang that on a coat rack and then OSHA comes in, that's a big fine. They're going to fine the hell out of you for improper, unsafe storage of that mask. They need to be kept clean, sanitary, and if they're going to be reused at all, there needs to be a maximum number of uses. All of this needs to be laid out, and your employees need to be appropriately trained and given a statement telling them about the optional nature of these masks and that these are strictly optional. They're available for your use. You don't have to blah, blah, blah. And they need to acknowledge that. So that's one option. And then you just kind of leave it up to them to do it if they're sensitive or not. But that does leave open the possibility of somebody not using it, even if they are sensitive and still getting injured. And so if there is somebody, so that's another thing. You hire somebody new. They don't know if they're sensitive to cannabis dust. You don't know if they're sensitive to cannabis dust, and then it turns out they are, and that they have a breathing issue, and they can't perform that job function anymore. Like, what do you do then? I don't know. That's getting into maybe some employment law situation. But I guess one recommendation I can give would be if there's anywhere else in the company that doesn't involve working in areas with cannabis dust that you can give them another position, maybe offer that to them if you can. Other than that, I don't know what to do with that. And I'm not giving legal advice here. Disclaimer: I'm not giving medical advice. All that. I'm just giving information that hopefully is helpful to you. So, if you're a worker, what can you do? Well, one, kind of be honest with yourself. Are you sensitive to your work environment or not? Some people are not terribly sensitive to it. They're just fine. But some people are. And then ask yourself if it's something you feel like you can deal with. It's just a little sniffle, or is it impacting your breathing? And in that case, communicate to your employer very clearly about what you're feeling, what's happening, and hopefully you have a reasonable employer that will work with you to get you out of that situation. But no guarantees there. But your health again is number one, so don't leave it to chance. Another thing you can do is read all the MSDSs, the material safety data sheets for anything that you work with. These should be provided by your company on site. If they are not, that is a violation. Um, I would encourage them to gather and provide those for you. And in the meantime, you can always look them up on your own, because it's worth it to do it on your own, because we're talking about your life, your health, your safety, your long-term health here. Something that maybe just smells, has a little ooh, I got a whiff of that and that burned a little in the moment. You do that once a day for 20 years, I don't know, something else might happen. So if you can't, if your employer does offer optional N95s and it's comfortable for you to do that, you can do that. You might want to still go ahead and get your own medical evaluation on wearing a mask, and um, whether you're able to do that safely. And also be honest with yourself there too, if that's not working for you. If you're sensitive to it, but the mask would help, but the mask's too much for you to handle. It's hard for you to function. Maybe look at another aspect of the industry that doesn't involve those kinds of functions. So with that, I just want to, thank you for listening once again to Concentrates with Dr. T. Again, subscribe to me, to my channels on YouTube and Spotify. I hope this podcast was useful to you and had a lot of good information for you. This is a developing story, so I'm sure I'll be circling back to it in the future as more information comes to light. But in the meantime, stay safe out there. Protect yourself, and employers, do what you can to protect your employees. They're there working passionately for you, and they believe in your mission. So anything you can do to protect their health, please do that. So if you have questions about that, employers, please reach out to me. I do offer consulting on health and safety aspects of facilities, both currently operating facilities and also in facility design. This is one of the aspects that I will make sure is looked at and taken care of when designing a facility, is to design one that is worker friendly and will minimize these hazards as much as possible. At the end of the day, any industrial facility is going to be hazardous to some extent, and that's where really adequate safety training comes in, an understanding of your facility, the processes and the hazards, and adequate safety training. So again, thank you for listening. Happy Friday, everyone. I hope you have a great weekend, and I will catch you next time.